Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And I hope everybody had a great lunch. And to move further with our next session for the day, this is a panel discussion hosted by Vadodara chapter on the topic stabilization phase in MVP development. And before we begin with the panel discussion, I would like to thank our founding sponsor, Innovation Roots, which is a leading consulting and training service provider, helping organizations to achieve business agility and beyond. It is one of the leaders and pioneers of niche publishing services and is well known for content collaboration with global thought leaders, authors, and creators. For more information, please visit www.innovationroots.com. And I would also like to thank our sponsor, Agile, which is a product offering from Tata Consultancy Services Limited. And it is a purely cloud-based enterprise agile planning tool along with DevOps capabilities. Enterprises can use Agile to adopt agile practices or scale across multiple Scrum and Kanban teams using enterprise scaling frameworks such as SAFe, Disciplined Agile, Less and More. You can try out Agile for free for up to 20 users for 1 year by signing up at agile.io. Or you can also reach out to us for any inquiries or exclusive product demo. Check out the Agile page on Agile Network India website for more information. All right, over to you now, Amol.
Thank you, Shreya. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amol Londe, and I would be the moderator for this session today. To briefly introduce you about what I do, I have around 15 years of work experience working on various domains in information technology. I have extensive experience in product development from ideation to market and beyond. Currently, I work as a product owner at Zibok Healthcare and principal architect at the Helios Solutions. That's about me, and I'll let Shruti introduce herself. Shruti.
Good afternoon, all. I am Shruti. I have around 14 years of experience working in IT. I have performed various roles and I started on my journey in IT as a developer, then slowly transformed myself into an agile consultant. Right now, I'm working in Agile Technologies as an engineering manager and I handle IoT products. And I'm really a agile enthusiast. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Rajendra Vijay. I'm a part of Automation Anywhere product management team, currently working as a principal product manager here. Here, I'm responsible for Automation Anywhere product strategy, product roadmap. I have around 15 years of experience, wherein similar to Shruti and Amol, I also started out as a developer and then I served in various capacities, development, IT consulting, business development, and off late for past couple of years, 7+ years, I've been working in product management. Here, our products are specific to automation domain, so you might want to give it a chance. Go to www.automationanywhere.com to know more about the company and the products. Thank you.
Hello everyone, this is Anirudh Jala. I possess proven track record of accomplishments in different roles in global delivery model for various industries like India, online classified, marketplace, e-commerce. I have been in IT industry since last 19 years, starting my career as a web developer to the product and development manager. I work with leading IT companies to help them define product strategy, market launch, and maintenance.
Thank you. Rocky start. But thank you, Aniruddha, Rajendra, and Shruti for joining us this afternoon to discuss about the stabilization phase in MVP development. All of us have been practicing Agile for a while. And I think before we get started into the discussion, it would be a good idea for our audience to define what a stabilization phase is in a product MVP. So Rajendra, I would like to start with you. If you could define what constitutes a stabilization phase.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Amol. So there are all kind of products, but in this particular session, we are going to focus on IT products. And in IT products, again, we are going to focus on the products which are developed using agile methodology, wherein the concept of MVP or minimum viable product is extremely important. So once the product is conceptualized, built, tested, and finally it is ready to see the light of the day, it is ready to uh, be used by the customer. So what all happens during that time when customers are validating the value proposition, customers are passing on the feedback, what all happens during this phase? We would focus on that particular time frame and activities that happen during the time.
Thank you. I think given the nature of the subject, it would be a very vast domain to discuss in a smaller portion of time. But thank you for defining the boundaries around the topic that we would be discussing, Rajendra. Uh, as we talk about MVPs, it becomes more important to discuss on the markets that where these products get launched. So I want to ask to you, Aniruddha, what are the different phases or market segments that are defined for a stabilization phase? Or how would a stabilization phase more be defined in a context of a B2B segment or a B2C segment?
Yeah, sure, Amol. Uh, there are four buckets which we need to consider as far as various market segments are concerned. Uh, as far as IT products are concerned, you have to focus on division between iteration, your box, your depth, and your innovation, because all these three segments are very much varying from different phases of the phases, like from fresh MVP to the stabilizing to the completer.
Thank you, Aniruddha. So, as we have saw the introduction to what a stabilization phase is, we have defined the boundaries around it. We spoke about how stabilization phase caters to different market segments of, say, business to business or business to consumer. I would like to talk in more detail about how the implementation part of a stabilization phase occurs, right? And in any implementation, there needs to be auditing, which is a very important aspect. So, Shruti, next, I would like to ask you about different matrices and different processes that go into measurements that go into a stabilization phase, and how we could actually check that we are on the right path.
Yeah, to answer your question, for each one of us, the only measure to actually have progress in place is through visualizations. So if you have charts created and you know how well you're progressing on your metrics, which are well defined, will give you a clear cut idea. And then, are you stabilized or do you want to keep your focus somewhere else? So the two ways in which you can actually see your progress is either on the quality of the product, and the other one is the performance of the team. So quality is something that is very external, and then this will be available to the outside world. And team progress, or you can say performance of the team, is something internal. So these two aspects needs to work on. When I talk about quality, so you can actually measure how many defects are you actually including in the product per sprint, per phase, whatever milestone you have actually thought about. You can actually see what is the review rework that you have to do after each and every sprint or the milestone, which will give you a analysis on the cost of quality that you're actually incurring. So these two aspects are very important. When you come to the performance of the team, then you actually measure then how well are you actually managing the lead time, the throughput time, and what is your cumulative flow graph. Whenever there's a need arise, there's a feedback from the customer. What is the cycle time to actually fulfill that? So if there is some urgent need and your flow time is like you see the cumulative flow graph and you say the lead time is really less, you know that you're progressing well, you're more stable, and that is why you have a full-fledged, very strong product in place. So if you have all these things in place and you're managing it and not in the heat of like progressing and delivering, you forget about the metrics, then I think you will be able to sustain a stabilization phase very well.
Thank you, Shruti. That was very insightful, and all of us can agree like there's no substitute to performance and quality, as it needs to be the IQT pie. It needs to be the most important factors in uh, any product and its life cycle. So, thank you for that. Now, as we spoke about different matrices, different practices that we should put around maintaining the quality throughout the product life cycle, how we can ensure that the performance is measured. Next, I would like to talk about uh, having these formulas in hand, what are the different best practices that we can implement as part of having a successful stabilization phase? So, Aniruddha, if you could please explain two of the best practices that you practice as a product owner.
Yeah, sure, Amol. Uh, I would suggest everyone to be prudent, to divide your four buckets, which are again innovation, uh, bugs, your technical depth, and your normalization. So, since you might be in the middle of the phase of your MVP, there are different ways to divide all four days. We are going to discuss exactly about it later in the next topic. But this is the first best practice I would like to recommend. Second one is that if your product is B2C and if security and privacy matters in your product, then I would suggest that you should take care of it since the beginning without waiting of the stabilization phase.
Definitely. I think that could be a good practice to have it as, all around all the phases of SDLC. It makes, a lot of potent sense to have a successful implementation. Rajendra, we would love to hear your thoughts about what best practices you practice in automation anywhere.
Sure. There are a lot of things, but if I have to talk about some of the top ones, from the product management side, one thing that I've found is extremely important is the intense focus on the validation of the value proposition during the stabilization phase. So, for example, your product is all developed, tested, and everything has come good so far. Your engineering team has done an amazing job. Your user experience team has designed a product which is so simple, so easy to use. But at the end of the day, if customers do not find sufficient value out of using the product, if they're not willing to pay for the product, then nothing is worth it. So
Mhm.
during this phase, when customers are actually meeting the product, there should be an intense focus on validation of the value prop. That is number one thing. For
Mhm.
example, when we were launching our flagship product Automation 360, what we had done was we had prepared an Excel sheet and we had listed two most common use cases and we had given them the steps, exact steps, in order to get a very specific feedback. We had given them a series of steps that they needed to execute, and against each of the steps they had to say yes, no, could I do that, what did I get at the end of it, do I find it
Mhm.
useful, right? So that was one. Second thing is, during the stabilization phase, again, there is going to be a lot of feedback which will flow from outside in, and we need to have a solid plan ready with respect to all the stakeholders. So before we hit the stabilization phase, we should have a well defined, commonly agreed upon plan in written in advance, wherein all the different members would be uh, aware of what their roles and their responsibilities are. For example, we should have a RESI metrics wherein my support team, for example, or customer success management team, who are interfacing with the customer, who is getting the feedback firsthand, they would know uh, what are their responsibilities, how the feedback will be disseminated across the organization, who needs to be informed, who needs to be held responsible for a particular item, who needs to be held accountable at the end of the day. So a commonly agreed upon, well defined plan is extremely important. I cannot emphasize the importance of it enough. This was the second thing, Amol.
Uh, Thank you, Aniruddha. Definitely, and
My name is
I
Rajendra. That was we, man.
sorry. Thank you, Rajendra. Definitely, I think it makes a lot of sense to have the process jotted down to the point where uh, everybody has a clear understanding of the boundary that we are working through, and like once you are into validation phase, the crazy noise starts coming in from all the directions. So having that channelized to a checkpoint is really extremely important. I think that gives a lot of importance to the points that you have put through together, Rajendra. Thank you. Next question is more from a product management side of uh, uh, having a stabilization phase. So this I would appreciate if you could also add a little bit of your personal experience on how you dealt with it. So when we are into stabilization phase, right? So there are different stakeholders that are involved. So in generally, there is a technical debt, there is a technical team, customers, your in-house product owners, stakeholders. So all of this is happening. So how do you manage the expectation, and what is a good formula to manage this expectation? Aniruddha, if you could talk about it.
Sure, Amol. As we discussed earlier, there are three phases of MVP. The fresh one, the stabilizing MVP, on which this webinar is going on, and the complete. So I would suggest that when your MVP is fresh, you allocate your 80% resources behind iteration and innovation, and roughly 30% resources behind fixing bugs and addressing technical needs. But during stabilization phase, you should allocate half of your time in addressing the technical depth, 30% behind iterations, and rest 30% behind innovation and bugs. Apart from that, when your MVP is about to complete, you should focus maximum on technical depth as well as fixing bugs, and then maybe 20% time you can allocate to iteration and innovation. By this way, you can manage the expectation of different departments.
Definitely. So uh, there is always things are always easier with formula, right, Ben? Because then you have something coming down to a science from a proven experience, and it helps. And I'm sure, like all three of you in your careers would have tweaked with that formula here and there, adding 10%, giving or taking. But I think this is really helpful. Thank you, Aniruddha. Uh, Now, we have spoken about processes, matrices, what is important. when you are allocating your resources. So we've spoken about the buckets, what would be the good idea when you are doing the stabilization phase. So we spoke about best practices. Now I'm very certain that nothing comes easy. So there would have been some unique challenges that all three of you would have faced in your career. So I would really love to hear your experiences about, especially with stabilization phase. So we'll start with Shruti.
Yeah, thanks, Amol. So, with Matrix, we actually were trying to manage commitments. With what Anirudh actually told about, we were trying to manage expectations. The other thing which comes
Mhm,
with it is managing communication. Because when you
mhm,
talk about there's noise everywhere, somebody wants this, that, you have to match the roadmap, you have to manage expectation. So, how are we managing communication in this phase becomes very important, because with multiple customers, multiple stakeholders, multiple teams, it becomes very chaotic at times. So that is the biggest challenge I feel we face in a product development life cycle, and especially in the stabilization phase where everybody has deployed software and they're looking for newer features. So if you have interconnected systems and you notify the people there in the system well in advance, and they know what is to be as in looked at, what is to be communicated, this managing all this becomes a challenge. And having interconnected systems with tight budgets is again a very very important food for thought, right? How do we manage it? So this needs to be looked at from a very what do you say, a very wider aspect, and you should start planning for it right from day one. And then how will the communication flow down, and there should not be any leaks in that system. That is what I've learned in my experience.
Definitely the 50,000 feet view peeking into the system, top-down approach. Thank you, Shruti. Rajendra, we would love to hear from you a unique challenge that you have faced in stabilization phase.
Hey, sure, Amol. I'd like to extend what Shruti was saying because communication is one of the very big challenges, not just in stabilization phase, but throughout the life cycle. And during this stabilization phase, it becomes extremely important. And I'd like to extend or focus on a very specific type of communication, which is the written communication that we should focus on, use as much as possible. So, for example, um, during the pandemic time, we are working from home, and we have our stand-ups, we have our regular team meetings, we have regular cross-functional meetings. But it is not uncommon to hear things like, "Oh, is this what you meant? Is this what you said? No, I thought I understood it like that." So
Mhm,
this is something that I think all of us have experienced, and I have also experienced. And from my personal experience, I've understood that whenever we are making any requests, any asks to the other person, any requests, then it is better to put things in writing. It helps both the person who's making the request and the person to whom we are making the request. For example, if I'm requesting Anirudh or Shruti for something, then when I'm putting things on paper, on mail, then it would force me to think better. It would it would force me to organize my thoughts better. If there are any ambiguities, then I would catch them before I make the ask. Same thing when Anirudh or Shruti are receiving it. First of all, they would understand it better when it is written. Second is they can always go back and refer, because what happens is we hear things and sometimes we forget. But when things are written down, then they can always be referred later on. And as they say, communication is something that is the most important thing. So this is one of the challenges that I think we deal with, and we can address it in some way by focusing as much as possible on the written communication.
definitely, Rajendra, and just to add a little reference to the context, a while back there was a survey from McKinsey, and they do these huge data sets, right? When it McKinsey surveys, so 62% people in IT agree with what the views that you have, that the communication needs to be formal, so it makes sense. It becomes a clear accountability, and the responsibility then lies with the person receiving it to clarify if there is something that is not understood, rather than in the informal setting. And a session before this, we had a panel discussion about conflicts in workplace, and there also the conflicts very nature of it arises from misunderstandings. And I think a lot of this, having a structured communication, would definitely aid in that process, at least to reduce it to some degree. um, Aniruddha?
Yeah, thank you, Amol. I would like to add up here that during stabilization phase, often various departments tend to be relaxed, whether it is product or marketing or IT, by believing that ship is floating now and they can relax a bit. Of course, it is partly true, but I personally believe that this is the exact time or a peak from where you have to shoot up into the sky to grow more, right? Or to more complete your MVP, because your idea is validated, but still you have a long way to go. So to overcome this challenge, I would suggest everyone that yes, don't lose your guards and keep your efforts still constant by believing that there is still a long way to go in order to complete your.
Definitely, I think developers would really get angry with you. I'm sure you said now. You have brought it to the MVP. Now it's time. Get up. Let's do it again. But uh, there's no sleep for the weary. I'm sure to bring it to a great success, we always need to be in that full potent mode. Thank you, Aniruddha. So like all these challenges that come in, and say all of this is in place, but there is always certain amount of risk that is associated with any new venture that you take it to the market, and you are validating it, and everything else is happening. So I just would love to understand that from your experiences, what are the different risks that uh, one might face during the stabilization phase. So we'll start with you, Shruti.
Uh, the biggest risk I feel is about data security, because day in and day out we are dealing with data. We have user data in our systems, so all that may be accessible to the outside world. So it needs to be properly encapsulated. So having the data security pattern in picture and designing the system in such a way that each and every time we understand that security needs to be provided by design, that becomes
Mhm.
very important, and it is a risk to the product. Anytime there is a breach, then the product cannot be employed somewhere, then it becomes a huge problem for the product management team.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that's.
Definitely, I think data security, the more open we become, the more connected world becomes. Data becomes very important aspect that plays a role. 2 days back, there was a post on LinkedIn which said that somebody tried to use somebody's credit card from India in Ireland to buy something on iTunes, and he was asking, "How did my credit card go to Ireland, and I'm not able to get the visa?" So that's like, yes, something is happening. So
Yeah.
truly right, like it's very important to have those pieces in place to secure your customer data, so there is no breach of trust anywhere.
Mhm.
Rajendra?
Sure, Amol. Uh, I agree with Shruti on the risk around data security. And from my experience, I've seen many things can go wrong but one thing that is common that I see happening a lot is the overcommitment of scope of what we are trying to build in a particular sprint, for example. And I've seen young product managers especially making this request when the customer is sharing the feedback. Sometimes we get defensive. Oh, this is sort of negative feedback, let me address it as soon as possible before things go out of hand. So we go to our engineering team, and then we try to get as much things in as possible. And if the engineering leadership is also not strong enough, not mature enough, and they happen to commit to all the things that the PM is asking, then there are serious risks. So a couple of things that can go wrong. If this happens, the very first thing is obviously will not be able to finish things in time in the sprint. We have signed up for more than what we can accomplish in this sprint. So first thing is delivery dates are missed, which puts a serious question on the entire project management team, delivery team, and our commitments, future commitments will be questioned. Second thing is, even if somehow we manage to achieve the scope within the timelines, it is going to reflect in the quality, because we have somewhere compromised on the quality, we have somewhere cut the corners, and customers will discover it, and then it will hurt even more that we have given you a half-baked product, some of the things do not quite work, and for some of the cases it might even turn to the level of you know unacceptable things for customers. Third thing is, even if we manage to prevent the symptoms on the quality side, we manage to achieve the date, but our engineers will do something in the code. And what this means is we will see an introduction of technical debt in the code, which will hurt us down the line. It is going to slow us down. All of those symptoms which we have managed to hide now, maybe sooner or later, they will come out in the open. So a lot of things can go wrong when we try to do more things than what we should be doing, what our capacity is in a given sprint, in a given time frame. And it takes a certain maturity to arrive at that, to get the feedback and see that, yeah, okay, we have so much, but here is the plan. In the first sprint, I'm going to do only these three things. If those three things are done well, then I'm going to focus on next two things in the next sprint. And here is the how I'm going to communicate with customers around what is our plan. Yeah.
Definitely, and this is a live example from last week. So I work in telemedicine field, right? So one of the my prime feature of my system is a voice to text translation engine, which basically you see the dictations when go to meeting is going on. So it does a legal dictation for the doctors. So this was not in the market. It was one of our USPs, and we launched this. We are going heavily into the market. So one of our biggest competitors, right? Uh, the general idea is some you start losing the market share, you try to run into the catch up game, but uh, their first thought is they already have a bigger competitor and now they have a competition coming from the bottom line. So what do? They sent out a survey to around 50,000 doctors, asking them what would be the feature that would make the using of the system most easier, right? So this is the right thought process I felt in that moment, because I am also one of the registered quiet Trojan horse there. And I feel this is the right way of doing it, rather than going into that catch up game, receiving the right feedback, giving the right commitments, and uh, even though in short term it will feel like a crunch, in longer run it will always add the trust to the and credibility to what we deliver. And the moment you compromising on quality or performance, cut corners, it always comes to haunt you back. And we have way too many examples in internet's history to see that what it does to a company.
True.
Thank you, Rajendra. Uh, as we spoke about introduction of what stabilization phase is, how to measure it, what matrices to use, what are the risks, what are the challenges, how we overcome them. Uh, this is a lot of how would you say, there are two thought processes when it comes to stabilization phase, because lot many time people feel that okay, there is something at end of it, so there is a scope always for tomorrow, so let's not do it today. And there are different debts that get incurred because there is a stabilization phase. But I would like to hear from all three of you as to what your thoughts are on having the stabilization phase in a MVP, and overall any suggestions to our audience about the stabilization phase. We'll start with you, Shruti.
Yeah. I think stabilization phase gives you a ground to actually prepare for the next phase of the product. A lot of people actually think that because there's something to come at end, we can actually push our technical debts towards the end in the stabilization phase. But I'm not a great fan of this idea, because what I believe is do it right the first time. If not the first time, maybe there are defects or something, do it immediately is the next thing that you can do. But pushing things back about the work that has been done in past, which actually just increase your cost towards the end, and somebody who actually bears that cost will be the product team and not the customer. You'll not be able to actually add that value when you do it later. So the best thing to do is for the stabilization phase is prepare for the next phase. If there are some plans to be made, make your product robust so that it can actually take care of the future advancement of the product. If there are technical debts to support the future enhancement, then go ahead and do that. But don't actually start with the thought that okay, we will do the tech debts later. I think this is how we should look at things, and then we will have seamless development and better consumer delight.
Definitely. uh, Aniruddha.
Yeah. Thank you, Shruti. I'm mostly in line with what Shruti suggested. Uh, Not to pre-plan about it, and I'm also not fan of this stabilization phase. However, I stay on the middle of it, which means since we live in a complex world where there could be a very complex demand of customers, competitors, product and marketing team. So if the situation arrives to push certain dates into future, I would be fine with it. So yes, I'm okay to have stabilization phase, but I would emphasize that it should not be pre-planned, or there should not be allocation of time or resources as a part of your product strategy. And gradually, organization should also learn to live without it, and should use it as a kind of only as an emergency situation where you have certain kind of obligation only. Then you should only plan for stabilization phase. Otherwise, as should be suggested, you strategize the product in such a way that this phase wouldn't come.
Definitely, Aniruddha. Thank you. Rajendra.
Sure, Amol. So I think in the agile world, the emphasis is on reducing or shortening the feedback loop, uh, getting customer a part of product development, incorporating their requirement, their concerns, etc. better in the product. And stabilization phase is the place where customer gets to see the real product, and before that they've only heard about the concept and all. So I think this is the most important phase for guys who are especially coming for or from the field of product management, wherein customer is actually using it, customer is able to tell you all that we've had so far, both internal and external discussions that we've had, Was it all worth it? What was the outcome of it? How does the customer see the product? What is the
Right.
quality of feedback that is coming in? And then we discussed the challenges, the best practices, and all those things. So in my opinion, from the product management world, stabilization phase is definitely one of the most important phases, if not the most important phase.
Um, Definitely. Thank you, Rajendra. So we have uh, one no, one yes, and one is standing on the fence. So I think we'll say it
I am on
was
the middle.
you are the winner. All right. So
No, no, I said I am
thank
the
you.
middle. I am fine with to have it or not to have it. Both are.
All right. So I know you are a manager because you are in the middle. Uh, that's the most tricky part of not being on any side, and it's a very clever role to manage. But we have some wonderful questions from audience. Uh, well, I'll read some of them, and please feel free to any one of you to answer. Uh, so one question we have is, as we spoke that lot of information is coming in. So how do we manage this feedback so that it becomes more relevant? It translate into right user stories and things like that.
Sure. So as we were discussing earlier, uh, there is going to be all kind of feedback, good, bad, not so good. If we have a well-defined plan in place in terms of how are we going to address that feedback, how are we going to incorporate that into the product in subsequent sprints and all, I think that helps. So for example, our support team, our customer success management team, they are given a playbook from our side, from the product management side, that these are some of the common questions that customers might want to ask or know the details about. Then this is how you address them. There are going to be areas wherein there are genuine defects in the product. So in those cases, our support team directly works with the L4 team, who have
Mhm.
been enabled to deal with those defects, those areas which are not so smooth. Uh, then there is feedback, a category of feedback which is about, okay, I like what I see, but can you also give me something more? So for that, our customer facing team work with us product managers about how do we take that. So again, there are three categories for the feedback which comes to us. Something that we already plan, because we cannot deliver everything in one release. So we have planned it, first release this much, second release this much, and all. And many a times thought process is common because customers also have their own brains and all. So they would ask things which we have also thought of, and we tell them, yeah, this is in the roadmap, this is coming. Second thing is something that is a discovery, which is when the product managers are pleasantly surprised. This especially happens in B2B world, wherein the customer set is limited, unlike B2C. So we really appreciate this particular category where customers are helping us with the input
Mhm.
that is something that we have not thought through earlier, but that is extremely valuable in the hindsight. The third category is something that we see that is not so common. This particular customer might see value in this, but for a lot of other customers, uh, it would not really delight them. So we might want to do a gentle pushback on that category. So we'll say things like, yeah, that's a great feedback. For this particular thing, you can achieve it in 2 extra steps. So like that, we deal with the feedback.
Uh, Definitely. And I have a question actually, just a follow up to this. Like, it's fine for a product that has a established market and you are there for some time. But as we speak about fresh MVP. So we may not, or rather, is it necessary to have a support structure in place upfront to manage these feedback cycles, or like what would be the alternative to taking care of incoming information flow?
Sure, sure. So, Amol, there are no fixed rules. Um, Different companies have different structures, different sort of teams who interface with customers. In my previous company, product management team was doing all the interfacing, right?
Mhm.
So there are no fixed rule. The most important thing is everything should be well defined. We should not be surprised by something that happens during stabilization phase. So for example, it should not happen that customer is asking something, three different people are responding,
Definitely.
right? And they are offering
Mhm.
three different perspectives.
Yeah,
As a company who is representing the product, we should speak in one common voice, which should not cause any confusion to the customer. This is where the plan helps. This is where the division of responsibilities help. So you may
definitely.
or may not have support team, you may call it some other team. And in the startup, I've also seen CEOs doing this work, co-founders
Right.
doing this work. They are doing all this
Right.
interfacing. They do not really have the manpower and all, so anyone can do it as long as it is properly thought through, it is properly defined, it is well agreed upon by all the members who are going to work on this particular exercise in the stabilization phase.
Definitely. Uh, there is a question from Ranjit. How Pareto principle for MVP helps in stabilization phase? Shruti?
Yeah. So I have not personally used the Pareto principle. There was not such need, but if we have to use it, right, it may be helpful. I spoke about the matrix, right? When I spoke about having efficiency matrix in place, defect efficiency place, as in what is the defect density of your product. So how many defects? If it is not actually giving you a trend and you are not progressing well, you can actually derive a Pareto from the RCA of the defects, and that is where it will help because you would know how and where is the need to actually improve your process on. So in this particular fashion in the MVP, it is going to be beneficial for us if we do that RCA analysis based on the defect density that you are seeing in the trends.
Definitely. Thank you,
Uh,
Shruti. Thank you, Rajendra. Yes, Aniruddha, please.
yes, I would say that for MVP, actually, Pareto principle is best example in action. Why? Because not particular to stabilization phase, but when you launch an MVP, what you try to do is to develop 20% of your feature of your MVP and try and test with the uh, maximum number of users. So this is how you can, start working on MVP with the help of Pareto principle. And then, especially in stabilization phase, though we have not, used it practically, but I would say that you may increase the number of percentage of the features so that you can reach to more audiences apart from your cost target of customers, so that as we discussed earlier that you can make your MVP more lovable, like from MVP to ML stabilization.
Definitely. Uh, so there is a request also for a question Anirudh asked. If you could post the split of what the percentages for different formulas are for different MVPs during stabilization phase and how the allocation should occur in the chat box, that would
Yeah,
be
sure.
helpful.
Yeah, just going to test it. Okay, so here it is now. So
Yes,
product managers should consider this as a kind of baseline or something not as a best practices, because there are always various into these numbers. So yeah, these are something to keep as a mind, like a pole star. But then again, which you have to adjust your product marketing plan and strategy as per the market needs, as per the customer needs, because we all are agile and we respond to the change. So don't stick to the figures, but these are like baselines to help you to divide the portfolios.
Thank you. So that's all time we have today, but I would like to thank all three of you. Rajendra, as always, wonderful insight from your experience. Shruti, thank you for all the information. Thank you, Aniruddha. We really appreciate you joining us here today. And thank you everyone for joining. You
Welcome.
have a wonderful and safe Holi. Over to
And
you, Shreya.
thank you to you
Same to
also,
you.
Amol,
Same
for
to you
the
all.
great moderation. And of course, thanks to our audience and Agile Network for having us here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
guys.
everyone, for such a wonderful session. It was definitely very interesting and such insightful views shared by every one of you. And we look forward to such more sessions by Vadodara chapter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Bye bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Shreya.
Welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.